Hello everyone and welcome to an episode of Roblox Studio Explained, and today we're going to be talking about remote events. And so a remote event, if we go, let's just say in the workspace and we type in our little search bar here, a remote event, we can see that it looks like this. It's got a little box down here and this little lightning bulb. So what do these do and why do we use them? Well, remote events are for client-server communication. So client is like starter GUI, starter pack, starter player, and everything like that. So say I have a ScreenGui and a text button, and now say I want it so that when this button that just says click me, and make the text scale. And now let's just say that when this button is clicked, I want the server to print something to the output, which we can go to view and we can go to this little box right here, and this will give us the output. And now we can see what's print and everything like that. So let's say I want the server to print that the button has been clicked every time this click me button is pressed. Well, to do that, we would use a remote event. Say I wanted this button to disappear when it is pressed. Instead, we can also do that. So for this example, I'm just going to make this button disappear once it has been clicked. And so to do that, I'm simply going to destroy the button when it is clicked. Now to do this, one could go insert a local script and just type script.parent.mouse button when clicked, connect function script parent.parent, which is the ScreenGui, destroy. And now this would work. When I click this button, you can see that it disappears. But for the purpose of demonstrating how remote events work, we're going to destroy the button through the server. So instead of destroying it, we're still going to have a function when the button is clicked, but instead I'm going to delete the line that destroys it, two new lines, and I'm going to like local rs, which stands for replicated storage, equals game get service double quote replicated storage, and you'll have autofill that can help you fill all of this in. And so this is telling the game what replicated storage is. Now, what actually is replicated storage? We can see it's a service that we have over here. But what does it do, and how is it different than server storage? Well, server storage is only accessible by the server. So say we had a script in script service, it could access everything in server storage. But if I were to put a remote event into server storage, and a remote event is, as I said, for client-server communication. The client will tell the remote event to fire, and the server decides what happens when that remote event fires. Or, on the flip side, the server can tell the client to fire a remote event, and the client can tell the remote event what happens when it's fired. And so it's a way to communicate between scripts, specifically client and server. And so, if I say game dot server storage dot remote event fire server, and this just fires the remote event to the server and tells it to do whatever it's meant to do, and I run the game and then I click the button, we can see the remote event is not a valid member of server storage, and this client is what printed this. We can see right here, and it's a local script. And so this just proves that the client does not have access to server storage. Only the server does, hence the name server storage. So deleting this remote event, replicated storage exists as a storage that both the client and the server can use. This is where we want to put our remote event. So if I put a remote event in here, and then I go to our script, and then instead of server storage, I just put rs, which we told the game earlier is equal to replicated storage, then it will fire the remote event to the server. And it won't error this time, but it won't do anything because we haven't assigned the event yet. So now if I click the button, we can see that it doesn't error in our output, but it also doesn't do anything because we haven't yet bound the remote event to a function. To do that, we go to service, and we insert a new script. And in this script, we're going to access the remote event, so local rs equals game, get service, replicated storage, local event equals rs wait for child remote event. Now, if I just put rs dot remote event on my computer, it probably wouldn't error. As you can see, it doesn't error. But on slower devices, if we have it initialize a variable like this instantly on slower computers or something like a mobile device, it may not load the remote event in replicated storage yet when this script runs. So to solve that problem and to make it not error, we use wait for child replicate or remote event. And this makes it so that it waits until the remote event is loaded in server storage before accessing it. It yields all of the script's execution until this remote event is in storage. And so it just simply prevents errors. And so now we can type event.onServerEvent connect function, and it passes the player that made the event fire as a variable. So now I'm just going to have it simply print player dot name dot space press the button, and this will print the player's name. Press the button. It's very simple and very straightforward. And then I'm going to go player.playerGUI .ScreenGUI or we can just do .ScreenGUI destroy. And the way that a player works in Roblox Studio is that if I were to load into the game, we can see that starter GUI exists and it has our ScreenGUI and button in it still with our local script and all of that. If we go to the player service and open my player, we can see that I have a player GUI that also has the ScreenGUI and the button and the local script in it right here. So when we put something in starter GUI, it is cloned into the player GUI object every time the game starts and a player joins. It is cloned to their player GUI, which is why we access it from player.playerGUI.ScreenGUI destroy. It destroys the button for only that player. Now this might not make sense, but think of it like every player is an object. Every player has their player GUI identical to starter GUI, and the player GUI is an object for every player. So if I have player 1, player 2, and player 3, I could have player GUI1, player GUI2, and player GUI3. And it would be for player 1, player 2, and player 3 respectively, because each player has their own player GUI. This allows the client to change it without changing it for everyone on the server. It's per player. And so that's why we access player.playerGUI to destroy the button. And now we see if I playtest the game and I click the button, we'll see that the server, not the client, the server prints the underscore boom10, which is my username, press the button. And now we can access the player name and just the player object as a whole, which is very useful when you're working with remote events and client-server communication. Press the button. And we can see that the server printed this because our remote event that we have right here in server storage acted as a bridge between the client and the server. And because of that, it allowed them to communicate to say, hey, this player pressed the button. And then the server said, okay, now we're going to destroy the button and print who pressed the button to the output. And it really is just simple. A remote event is simply a bridge of sorts between the client and the server and allows them to communicate with ease. The fire server property, it fires a remote event to the server. Now, let's display it the other way around, the flip side of that. The server communicating with the client. Our remote event is still going to stay in replicated storage as both the server and client have to be able to access it. But instead of waiting for this to do its thing, we will instead use a completely different example, as the server is going to communicate with the client this time. And so now I am going to insert a part, and we're just going to move this part into the air, anchor it, and we're going to insert a proximity prompt into this part. Now this proximity prompt is just the default. It's going to say that you can press E to interact or whatever. And so very quickly, I'm just going to turn off requires line of sight just to make sure it shows up. And then I'm going to add a server script into the proximity prompt. And I'm going to hit script.parent triggered connect function, and feel free to pause to be able to read and copy all this code, because I won't have it pasted in the description this time, but just feel free to pause and copy it for yourself. I'll give you time to do that. And we can see that the proximity prompt gives us the player who triggered as a variable. So the player who triggered, that's just the player who triggered the proximity prompt. That's going to be important in just a moment. So I'm going to press enter 2 times before our function, and I'm going to write local event equals game get service replicated storage dot remote event. This again just gets the remote event from replicated storage, which we can see is replicated storage dot remote event. And so now with our script, we're going to put event inside our function, fire client, player who triggered. And this is important where player who triggered matters, because it tells the client of the player who triggered it what to do. So say I had 2 players in my server, one was on computer, one was on mobile. Say the computer player triggered this remote event to fire by interacting with the proximity prompt. What I'm about to put in right here, what the remote event is bound to do on the client will fire only per the player on computer, because the player on computer is the one who made the event fire, not the player on mobile. So now let's just say that when this proximity prompt is triggered, the part that is its parent is destroyed. So to bind a remote event to a client event, what we will do is we will go to starter player right here, starter player scripts. We're going to go to this plus sign, insert a local script, and in this local script I'm going to write local rs equals game get service replicated storage, and then I'm going to put local event equals rs dot remote event. And now I'm going to put event dot on client event, not on server event this time, because we're on the client, connect function. And we can see that we don't have any default variables this time because there's none needed this time around. It's going to destroy this part in the workspace for that client. So we're going to do game get service workspace dot part destroy. And this time we don't have to use wait for child, because by the time that the proximity prompt is triggered, that means that this part is already there. So the proximity prompt would be there because the part is above the proximity prompt in our game's hierarchy. So the part will already be there, so we do not have to use wait for child. So now if I playtest this, we can see that I can walk up to my part, press E to interact, and our part's just suddenly gone. If I go to the workspace in the Explorer, it's not there. And we can see that up here it says that I'm currently running the client. But if I click it, I'm now running the server, and the part is still there, because nothing changed on the server, only the client. The client, the part's gone, and I can't run into it or anything like that. On the server, however, the part is still there, and very alive and very well, and we can still have our proximity prompt and all of that, and our script even. It's all still there, because the change only took place on the client. So remote events act as a bridge between the client and the server. They're very simple, very easy to use, and overall very straightforward if you know how to use them. I hope this video has helped you understand remote events and how they work in Roblox Studio. And if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to explain any and all I find. With that, that's it for today's video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And with that said, goodbye.